Chris Gasper, you owe me an apology. Your Red Sox takes, man. I mean, if you come around on this, or you just to reset, Chris Gasper says that, and let me know if I'm being unfair to you in any way here, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris Gasper says that winning is not important because the Arizona Diamondbacks haven't done anything this year after going to the World Series last year. You should not improve this team at the deadline because you don't like winning and you don't like fun. Is that correct, Chris?
No. I would say that's not my take. That's not my. I say that's a Felgerization of my take. My take's a little more nuanced than that. I know this show doesn't really do nuance very well, but essentially, my take would be: look, I don't mind them making a deal if they make a deal at the deadline that helps the team now and for the future. But I'm not of the mindset of the Felgers or the Ken Rosenthal's, or frankly, I think most of the people out there that feel like somehow, some way, baseball ops and ownership is owing it to this team, and it's a dereliction of duty if they don't go out and get some rental piece to help this juggernaut. I do not feel that way at all. So if they can make a move that helps them this year, great. For a pitcher with term, that's fine. But some rental guy that's going to be their version sort of Kyle Schwarber, who was great in 2021. I guess that would be my question. So how much did going to the ALCS in 2021, what was the benefit from that? How did that work out?
So I think my argument against that, Chris, would be that was an older team that, for the most part, the core of that team was still the 2018 Boston Red Sox. I do think there's a big benefit for this young group of players who have basically never played meaningful baseball games ever to play meaningful baseball in September and October. And as a result, I do think this team is worth investing in. I totally agree with you that it should be for a player with term. They should be willing to pay a higher prospect freight, higher prospect capital for that. But even a rental, I think, helps this team in the future because these young players would get to play meaningful baseball for the first time ever.
Yeah, so that's where my Diamondbacks take sort of comes in, McCarthy, is, again, look, I think that's this thing that we take as an article of faith, that if these young guys get exposed to the postseason, it's going to expedite their development. They're really, really going to benefit from it. But do we ever stop and question that or look at the empirical evidence? And yeah, I do use the Diamondbacks. And look, right now they've creeped over 500. They're only a game back, so good for them. But they're basically the same they were last year. Corbin Carroll, who was the rookie of the year, who had the season that Duran is having this year, has an OPS in the 600s. Alec Thomas, another one of their young players, hasn't really exploded. Gabriel Moreno hasn't really been better. So that has not been the case for that team. That's not what has happened with that team, where this sudden unexpected exposure to postseason baseball is this rocket fuel for their development. So that's one of those things that sounds good, but I don't know if it's actually true.
Let me just, this is what I need to know. So, Chris, what does the Red Sox situation need to look like for them to be buyers in this situation to really go for it and get aggressive? What does the roster need to look like? What does their scenario in terms of the standings need to look like?
The scenario for me, Mark, would be that I know that they have a core of a team that can contend on a yearly basis and that they have more pitching than they have right now, that I'm not looking at my pitching staff and saying, man, I'm already pushing the limits on Tanner Houck and Cutter Crawford, and that's not ideal. Bayo, I pushed the limits on last year, and he hasn't been as effective this year. I also need to look at it and say, well, okay, this is a good thing. It's a good thing that you're winning one-run games. But if you're 12-5 in one-run games, which is the best record in the majors, I think you look at it and say, well, that might even out a little bit, as will your record in terms of what they've done against teams who are above 500. The schedule gets a lot tougher in the second half. They were 16-26, which was in the bottom 5 in Major League Baseball against teams that were 500 and above. The nifty little thing about that record is it's not based on when you play the teams. It's based on what their record is. So the Pirates crawled to 500, and so did the Rays, and all of a sudden that record jumped to 25-30, which is completely deceiving. So I just think there are some red flags here that when you look at them say, this is not necessarily entirely sustainable, and they haven't arrived yet to the point where I'm going to mortgage pieces of the future for this 1 year.
So to use your own words, you wrote today, and I think this really sums up your opinion on this, Chris. They're enjoyable and entertaining, but I think genuine contention is a mirage, unquote.
Correct.
To which I would then add parenthetically, Chris, you hate winning and you hate fun.
I don't hate winning, and I don't hate. I'm glad they're winning. I mean, look, I'll say this. For me, the most important thing this year has been the development of Jarren Duran, the development of Tanner Houck, the development of Ceddanne Rafaela. That's the most important thing for me. I'm glad that they're a good team. I think it's been a lot more entertaining and interesting than we thought. But I'm going to tie this back to, because I know what you said, McCarthy, about the 2021 Red Sox. And you're right, predominantly an older team. But you know who was on that team? Alex Verdugo. He was a young guy. Was that rocket fuel for Alex Verdugo's career?
No,
having that experience?
Because Verdugo was a dumbass, Chris, and we all know that.
But did we think that in 2021?
I did.
Well, in other words, like, a few years from now, you could be saying, and I know this guy's not playing, a few years from now, you could be saying, oh, Tristan Casas is a dumbass. I'm just saying, when you look at the young guys, like, was that rocket fuel? So if that's a big part of what your rationale is for going for it, if you're trying to tie it basically to the future and the overall Red Sox plan, I just don't think it ties in that way.
All right, Chris Gasper joining us at 617-779-0985. But you do say you want to add, a piece that can be here long term.
Yeah.
Are there pieces that come to mind for you? You say a pitcher. Is it a Skubal from the Tigers or Crochet from the White Sox? And I think perhaps more importantly, what are you willing to give up for that type of piece? Because a player under contract is going to cost you a lot. Are you then, in turn, Chris, willing to give up one of the big three for somebody who can help this team this year and beyond?
Yeah, I would be willing to do that for a pitcher, for a front of the rotation pitcher, for like an ace type guy, or at least a number one on this team, which Crochet would be, which Skubal would be. I would absolutely be willing to give up one of those guys. I mean, if Jarren Duran and Rafaela are what we think they are, and you like Wilyer Abreu, then how much does it really hurt you to give up Roman Anthony?
Right.
At the end of the day. And he could be a great prospect. He's young, obviously, but left-handed hitting outfielder. But if you have Duran as an all-star and Rafaela goes back to the outfield and you like what you get from Abreu, wouldn't it make more sense to cash him in and get what you don't have, which is more top of the rotation starting pitching?
I couldn't agree more.
Don't you think, though, that there's an element here, and forget about the fans and what they want. Yeah. I know that the fans want certain things, and that is what it is. But just from the team and the culture of the clubhouse, and we don't know what's going to happen with Alex Cora. Obviously, he's talking about getting greedy. We know what he wants. Don't you think there's an element, and I'm not going to say responsibility, that might be too strong, but just to infuse the clubhouse with some level of confidence that the organization is about winning. And we're talking about the development of young prospects, and they benefit from getting into the postseason, whatever. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But just infusing the players with the confidence that they are about winning, and they do want to continue to build towards a championship. Is that important? Is that a dynamic at play here?
Yeah, it's definitely a dynamic at play. But I'll be honest, I don't think it's going to be the dynamic that ultimately determines what the Red Sox do or whether they do something. I don't think that will ultimately be what they determine it. If there's anything we've learned about this organization the last couple of years, is that they're not making decisions on emotion or sentiment. They're making decisions on data, and they're making decisions, I think, on when can we open our championship window. And the question they have to ask themselves, I've given you guys my answer, but the question they have to ask is this the start of our championship window? Like, are we there yet? Are we there ahead of schedule?
Yes.
Or are we still a year or two away?
I mean, would it have made sense for the Braves to get aggressive right when they lost Ronald Acuna a few years ago? I mean, you're in contention. You have a team they have 3 All-Stars. They have a team that's proven they can beat good teams in the American League. Am I missing? What are we missing here? Why wouldn't you go for a championship in this situation?
But I mean, so you think they're a championship team, Mark?
I don't know. All I know is that the Diamondbacks had 6 more wins than the Red Sox last year. They ended up in the World Series. They made some moves. They ended up in the World Series.
Yeah.
Baseball is a funny game. You never know who could get hot, who could get cold. You get into the tournament, the playoffs. Jackie Bradley Jr. is your ALCS MVP. Steve Pearce is your World Series MVP. You just don't know who could produce. If they're in position, I'm gonna try to maximize that opportunity.
I would. So my answer to that would be like, okay, well, look at the 2007 Colorado Rockies. They got super hot, right? They made the World Series. They ran into the Red Sox and lost, never to be heard from again. So, again, yeah, maybe one year, maybe you get lucky and you get to the World Series and then it's a 50-50 toss-up. I think just knowing this organization, the people running it, they want better odds than that. They're not in it for a one-shot deal. They're in it for, they want to be the Dodgers, right? Which is year after year, you know where you are. If we were talking about the Dodgers, I would be like, oh my God, yes, ownership, absolutely. You have your core, guys are in their prime, your team is built, like you have to go for it. Even with all the pitchers that are injured, like you got to go for it. This is your window. I don't feel that same way about the Red Sox.
They want to be the Dodgers. That's the furthest thing from what they want to be. The Dodgers spend money and go after big name stars. They don't want to be the Dodgers.
They want to be the Dodgers in terms of contention year after year after year.
It feels to me like you just never know. And this is a situation where, based on what they've done, it's right there for them and they could make a move. I'm not saying strip the entire farm system. And I don't know if you meant that the Rockies, the reason they were never heard from again was it because of moves they made in 2007 to catapult them to the World Series? Or was
I'm just saying it's like a one-off. So you're sort of saying now's the time. They have this core. I'm sure the Rockies felt like we have a core. We're going to come back. And it's like sometimes it's just a one-off. And so if you're making decisions based on a one-off, then that's going to be your sort of one and only chance. You're not going to be able to build something for the long term. So I think they want to build something can they do it? I don't know. I don't know if they're capable of doing it. Frankly, I have my doubts. But I also don't look at this team and think, wow, like this team really has like an amazing chance to win the World Series. And I definitely want to make sure I disrupt whatever the long-term plan is to help this team. That's just me. I don't look at it that way. I mean, let's also not forget, like they've been the best team in the major since May 19th. I give them a ton of credit for that, right? But I mean, were they not for the majority of the season, depending on how you look at the snapshot, a 500 team?
Sure.
Like they've gotten hot in like the last month. So it's like a player can get hot for a month. If a guy bats 380 for a month, is he a 380 hitter?
No.
Is that who he is? All of a sudden he's Tony Gwynn? So it's like, I think that's an element of it too. You know, do they ultimately believe at the end of the day, which one is the real Red Sox team?
You're right.
The one that was 500-ish or the one for the last 4 or 5 weeks that has been the best team in the majors?
It just feels like you could always find red flags every year, even with a good team. You could always, they don't have this, or there's this. I don't know if I trust this fully, or this isn't real. They're in the playoffs. They have some teams aren't as good as we thought. They're better than we thought. I say go.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Felger and Mazz here. For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.